Somewhere deep in the night, beyond the cover-ups and shadows, the scariest monsters lurk on the dark side of the paranormal. You're listening to the Foust Files with your host, Chris Foust. To reach Chris by phone, dial 833-355-TALK. That's 833-355-8255. And now, from the depths of a secret location outside the Rocky Mountains, here's your host, Chris Foust.
From the Mile High City and the foothills across the Rockies, I welcome you all to the Foust Files. And hey, everybody out there on Instagram, that's me. I'm talking to you right now. And if you want to watch the show, you can watch it live. You're watching it live here, but you can watch it and listen to it because we're going to be talking to a very special guest, and it's going to be on YouTube. So if you just go up to YouTube and you search for Foust Files, you'll be able to find the live stream that we have in the actual studio right now. But we are streaming this program, as well as many others that we've done, to all major social media platforms and various stations across the U.S. I'm your host, Chris Foust, and tonight we have another very special guest like we do on this show, Tami Urbanek, and she's going to be talking with us. She's actually been on the show before. She was live in the studio a few months ago, and it was a very entertaining show. She's an amazing person, and we really love her a lot, so we wanted to have her back on the show to talk more about Montauk, and we're going to be talking a few other things about ETs and ghosts and things like that tonight. So we're going to be asking her all sorts of questions, and I wanted to let everybody know there's a couple things on the website. If you go up to faustfiles.com, and there's a button that says call the show. Now tonight, because we're running into some issues with the studio, we're only doing 1 hour. This show is only 1 hour tonight, and I apologize for that, but we're going to get as much information as we can from Tammy. We're going to get her on here really quick. If you want to call the show, you can, and we're going to maybe try to take some calls. Okay, I'm not promising anything, but we might try to take some calls. John and James are in the control booth, so if you want to call, let them know what you want to talk about, and they'll put you on the air. The call the show button that's on the website is really cool. You can do it from your computer. It's very much like Skype. You don't have to worry about picking up your phone, dialing our number, or anything like that. If you're just sitting at your computer and you're watching this, you can click, and you'll be directed instantly to the phone lines. And we have plenty of phone lines open that you can do that. The other thing that I want to mention that you can do, you can click the little chat icon, and you'll see it down in the lower right-hand corner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in, and you can send me some chats if you want. You can say, hey, I'm really interested in, whatever we're talking about tonight. You want to ask Tammy a question? You can do that, and I'll relay the message to her. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Tami Urbanek. Now, Tammy is a medium who works with people to connect them with their spirit guides and also beings called the elders. Spirit guides and the elders offer life guidance and direction. They are in service to a person's soul and offer assistance through one's physical life. This can include relationships, career, life purpose, and in healing depression, anxiety, and anger. Tammy also offers life energy flow Tai Yi, I hope I said that right, energy work to assist and accelerate one's physical, emotional, and mental health and healing. Now, she has a book, and the book is called Silent Whispers. And I remember when we had that book before in the studio when she was here. And it's an amazing book, and we're definitely going to talk about it and have you guys check it out. There's a picture that's on the cover of that book, and we're going to have her mention and talk about what that means and what that is in relation to. Now, Tammy began her work in the public as a medium. She never envisioned how her path would change. Moving beyond working with people's spirit guides, deceased children began arriving to share their own shocking experiences These children revealed the horrific torture and government scientific experiments that ultimately led to their death. With a heavy heart, Tammy listened to their stories and helped them to feel loved and safe in order to cross over to the other side. And that's a really interesting, we've heard some stories from her before, and we're going to hear more tonight. And we're going to talk about Montauk. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on here. And just give me 1 second, because we always have some issues with our computer here. And now she should be on. Tammy, are you there?
I am.
Well, hi. How are you? It's good to talk to you again.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Now, when we were last speaking, you were in live on the studios, and we talked a little bit about your book, and we talked about Montauk. That was the big thing that we were discussing. And I know a lot of people had questions about Montauk. And I think it's something about that story that some people know and some people don't know. And so I was wondering if you could maybe educate some of the listeners out there who they don't know what Montauk is, because we say that and they think, well, what is that? And of course we know it's a town that's on Long Island Sound, correct? At the far end. Okay.
It's at the tip.
Okay. And a lot of strange things have happened there. And I'm just going to leave that to you and have you explain a little bit more about what that is and what you've experienced there. Just to educate the listeners just a little bit.
Well, in the town of Montauk, there is the also retired military facility, Camp Hero.
Okay.
And at Camp Hero, they had their special assignments. They had their regular facility there, but there were rumors that there were certain things going on underground. And then they needed to close it, I believe, in the, I can't remember if it was the 1960s or before that, but it's been closed for many years.
Now, when you say rumors going on underground, what do you mean by that?
Many people were talking about that there were things going on underground, that there were tunnels, and that there were experiments going on underground in regards to time travel and other things.
Really?
And it's all rumors as far as books go and YouTube videos go. But we were guided. It was suggested to us to visit Montauk, Camp Hero, to see what's really going on underground. And there is still, in my experience, activities going on underground.
Still to this day, there's activity.
Yes.
Now, the actual base itself is derelict, correct? It's completely looks like it's shut down and nothing's happening. So what makes you think that there's existing experiments going on?
On the surface, it definitely is shut down, but it's pretty preserved. So you have different sections of it that have different signs that say, this was the gymnasium, this was the cafeteria, this was another area. So you have signs that direct you to what the purpose of the site was when it was a military site. And then you have the radar tower that is surrounded by a fence, and it says no trespassers. But it's in a state park. So the entire area is open for anyone to walk through. The surface of the land is owned by New York, but underneath the ground is owned by the United States government.
Really? So what you're trying to say is that there are segregated parts of that land, some of which are owned by maybe a higher form of government than what the state park typically would be, correct?
Yes. So again, the surface is owned by New York, and underneath the surface is owned by our U.S. government. So they can do whatever they want underneath the surface. When I was there with the two other women that I have traveled with, we encountered many non-physical kids, teenagers, children, who talked about their torture. how they were murdered, what was done to them, the experiments as far as they understood it at the time.
What kind of, I'm going to stop you there, what kind of torture would the U.S. government do to children?
The experiments that they did on kids was a form of torture. So, for example, mind control. So you take a teenager or a child and you force them to do certain things, such as harm an animal, torture an animal. Well, that's also torture to the child. But you're trying to program their mind, program their brain to negate compassion, negate any type of nurturing. Then you also have other types of experiments, medical type of experiments, experimenting about cancer, radiology, these different types of experiments. They would use these children, I gather, to see if it worked, to see the effects on the human.
The experiments, did they ever involve time travel? I mean, do you really think that they involved because I know that that's been kind of tossed around a lot, and it's made quite a good story. I know that there's a lot of books published out there that have talked about the Philadelphia experiment and Montauk being a connected outlet in space and time, essentially. Two things that were very significant in time travel was Philadelphia experiment, and then the second is Montauk. Supposedly, now that's all just based on rumor and opinion, but were some of these children that you connected with, did any of them give validation to that?
No. I don't doubt that information is valid. I've also heard their stories, and I think there's truth to that. But the ones that I encountered never talked about time travel.
But what did they talk about then? If they didn't talk about time travel, was there anything that was dimensional, or was there anything that was aside from just mind control, or is the government strictly using those facilities to control the thoughts of others?
The ones I encountered, it was mostly about either mind control or medical experiments. What
kind of medical experiments were they doing?
For one, it sounded like they were using a certain type of UV light that ended up blinding him.
Really?
Yes. That's what he said, and he was blind, as he appeared to me anyway. He was blind. He was very angry. He said it burned. He refused to cross over because he didn't want any type of light around him. So that's one specific experience that I remember that's also in the book Silent Whispers.
Now, Tammy, I'm going to stop you really quick because it seems like we're having trouble with your phone.
Okay.
And I'm going to do something because I want the audio to come through really clear for everybody who's listening. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you talk to John really quick, or James, and we're going to try to get you back on if you could. We'll get the phone situation figured out. Okay, so hold on one second. Okay, so we're going to put John and James, if you guys could grab Tammy really quick and just have her call right back because we're having just a tough time hearing her. That phone's breaking up. So if you guys could, yep, there you go. Thank you. And then, okay, so now I've got just a quick minute. Everybody on Instagram, I'm going to give a wave because everybody's waving on there. I like that. That's nice. So hi to everybody. We're doing a live show, and the show is actually on YouTube. So if you go up to YouTube and search for Foust Files, that's Foust Files, right there on the back screen. Search for that in YouTube, and you'll find the live show right now, and you'll be able to listen to what we're talking about. And so just let everybody know, so that way you don't have to watch it on Instagram because you can't hear what's going on. You can only hear what I'm saying in the studio. So go check that out, and we'll get Tammy back on here in just a minute. And what we're talking about is we're talking about Montauk right now. And what's really important about that is Tammy has the ability as a psychic medium to connect to spirits, and she connected to these spirits that were children who were abused, tortured, and experimented on at Montauk through the process of the Montauk Project that we've all heard about. And if you haven't heard about it, that's what we're talking about right now. And I'm going to see if we've got her back on here. And I'm going to ask, do you guys have is she good now? Do we have a good line for her? Okay. All right, we're going to bring her back on. All right, Tammy, are you there?
I am here.
Okay. It's a little bit better. So we're going to go with this, and we're going to cross our fingers. So thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate that.
Yes, no problem.
So we were talking about that story where the young male figure that you had talked to, we didn't get into if he had a name or not, but he was blind and he didn't like the light because he was experimented on with UV light in his life.
Yes, that's what he said. He was a teenager, looked like maybe 16, 17 years old. And he expressed a lot of pain, a lot of anger, and how much it burned. So whatever they were doing to him, that was what he called it.
Now, after we die, do we carry over some of our fears and our anxieties that we had in a physical life?
Absolutely.
Do we harbor that? Do we keep that with us? Is it something that we have to work through on the other side as well as in a physical life?
Yes.
So when you were talking to this young man, did he have a name by chance?
I didn't ask him his name at that point.
Did he ever cross over?
In my presence, no.
Okay. So that's still something that his soul could be dealing with at this very moment.
It could be. It could be that he decided to receive assistance, or it could be he crossed over.
Now, when you're talking to spirits, you're giving them assistance, correct? You're guiding them a little bit. Do they have...
Right.
Are there other entities that are spirits that help us once we pass on and cross over?
Always. You're always going to have either your loved ones or your guides or both.
What if your loved ones are having a tough time? And you're not
going to...
when you cross over, are you instantly aware of everything? Your past, a lot of people say when you die, you get the video of life. So all your memories kind of come flooding through. You start remembering so many different things, all the bad things that you did, all the good things that you did, obviously if you were mentally hurt, physically hurt, anything like that, they literally come flooding in, and you are aware of it and you can deal with it. But do you remember past this life? Do you remember further back?
You're asking if you remember your past lives beyond this one?
Correct. Once you die.
Your part of your mind is always going to remember everything. It's going to record everything, every experience, every lifetime, every conversation, every experience. Does a person remember their past lives once they cross over? Not necessarily.
So in other words, what you're saying is
you can hold on to the experience from the physical that you just left. So if the physical that you just left from carries a lot of trauma, then that's likely going to be the energy that you become surrounded by because it wasn't healed.
What about when you die, is there ever a time that your soul could be asleep and not wake up to the other side?
Kind of. You can pass physically, and you're so caught up in trauma. For example, someone takes their own life. Or another example is someone dies completely alone, physically, completely alone. And they feel absolutely isolated from everyone who ever knew them, and they're completely abandoned, let's say. They can cross over into the non-physical where they hold on to this sense of darkness meaning an absence of light, not evil, but absence of light, a sense of being alone, abandoned, left behind. A person could hold on to that energy and not notice their guides are right there next to them, standing there,
Really?
waiting
Will,
for
decades. Will the guides ever interject?
They will not force a person to heal. They will encourage. They will offer support. They may bring in a third-party support if necessary, but they're never going to force a person to see them, but they will always remain there until the deceased person takes notice. And that could take, like I said, decades or even centuries.
But really, decades and centuries here is not the same there, is it?
Right. It's not the same at all.
So really
So I say that in our reference of time.
Sure. But time on the other side, that is something that is sped up?
It's perceived and experienced much differently, yeah.
Okay. Much like when we sleep, we don't have the concept of time, and it goes by very quickly. The only time that we have that concept is when we dream. And we can say, well, I was in a dream for what felt like 20 minutes, doing all these sorts of things. And our dreams, and it just leads me to this question, but are they a connection to that other side?
The dream state, let's say, can be. So you can have experiences when you're sleeping that is not exactly a dream, or you can have a dream that is symbolic of something that was happening.
Symbolic, meaning we're connecting to if we're using symbology within our dream, is that what you're trying to say? That it's like
dreams are symbolic.
Okay. So dreams aren't necessarily a direct connection.
Dreams are not a literal message.
Okay.
So you can have a dream where it carries symbolic figures or people that are symbolic, numbers that carry a message, but it's not a literal message. So you have to analyze a dream when it's significant as something symbolic.
Okay.
Whereas you can also, at the same time, have what I call an experience while you're sleeping that is literal. And that can be where you're speaking with someone or you're having an out-of-body experience. That's not a dream.
How would we know the difference?
The way I know a difference is a dream feels like a dream, whereas a literal message, I feel more physical. I feel like I have more control. It's more vivid. Sometimes I've had to ask for assistance because it feels like both. And I've had to ask, but to me a dream usually is pretty obvious, where a literal message feels literal. It feels very specific.
I had an experience that was pretty interesting recently. I woke up and I was talking to somebody. So I was sitting up in my bed, just like I would just sit up and like I was getting out of bed. There's a chair that I have in my room. And when I woke up, I was talking, my physical body was talking to somebody sitting in that chair. And it's like my brain just kicked in and said, wait a minute, something's not right here. What's going on? Why are we talking to somebody in our room? And I don't remember the conversation. I don't remember what happened, but I remember being curious about it and looking over at the chair, and then that person was gone. Now, was that something that I was possibly just dreaming, or do you think I was tapping into something that could have been a direct connection?
I think it could have been an experience versus a dream.
So when somebody has a dream, and I just want to give some of the listeners a little bit of a kind of like a guide to understanding what we're talking about. If somebody has a dream, the symbology that's built into the dream could be you wake up and it's just like, wow, this is really weird. I dreamt that I was on a bus and I got off the bus and I was at a restaurant, and that's pretty much the extent of the dream. And you just think, wow, it's really weird that I had that. So that's the dream and the symbology of what the visual part of the dream was. An experience, though, what you're saying is something completely different from that. And I've heard a lot of people have told me, and I've experienced it myself, loved one has crossed over and they come to you in a dream. And you might be sitting at their house. You might be sitting at a place that they really liked, or you could even be standing. But I'm just saying, like, you're in a place that represents them. And they are giving you a direct message. Like they're saying hi to you, or they're somehow just communicating with you. And I know a lot of people who have that. I just want to know if I can give them some comfort to say, you probably weren't dreaming that.
It could be. Everyone's different. So some people could be truly having an out-of-body experience with that deceased person. It could be that someone needs comfort, and so they manufacture that experience, which neither is right or wrong.
So they could literally just be calming themselves down from the death. It
could be.
Essentially. The anxiety, the depression, it's like the body and the mind are reworking, restructuring to kind of help move forward in a way?
Yes, it can be a part of the process of grieving to see that loved one and to create that experience. Of course, that's not true for everyone. Some people can truly experience communicating with the loved one who has passed. So it's just different for everyone.
Does somebody need to have the ability like what you have in order to communicate, or is that something that's in all of us?
Everyone can communicate with their guide.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone can communicate with loved ones on some level. So for some people, it might be unconscious rather than conscious awareness. I think most people can actually see the non-physical on some level, just not consciously. Because energy is all around us. We're constantly existing in energy. We're always a part of it. We're participating in it. We're creating it. Non-physicals are a part of that energy.
Are they just on a higher plane, or are they always here?
I wouldn't say higher plane, but I would say a different reality.
Okay. Do you think that reality is a lot like ours right now?
It can be. A person can pass from the physical, and they decide they're going to create a mind-generated reality in Alaska, let's say. Maybe they always wanted to be in Alaska. That was their dream. And they pass into the non-physical, and that's where they go. and they create this experience in their mind where they're living the land, they're fishing, they're just enjoying life.
Really?
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a wonderful experience for
It is.
them.
It sounds great.
It allows them to settle their energy.
Absolutely. Okay, so now if I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to ask you now, do people, when they cross over and they go to where they want to go, let's say it's fishing in Alaska, and that sounds great. That sounds like somebody's perfect environment to thrive off of, to have a centered environment for their soul, maybe something that allows them to focus. Do they know that they're deceased at that point? Or is it something like waking up and then they're just living that other spiritual life, but then they believe that that's the real life versus what they just lived here?
I don't think there's one answer for everyone. I think that everyone experiences it differently.
So people can die, though, without knowing that they're dead?
Yes.
And then, therefore, do they communicate still? Do they think that they're still in this physical plane, or do they put themselves in a completely different life sometimes, to where it's just... And I'm going to say, did you ever see What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams?
One of my favorite movies.
It is mine, too. And I really love it. And I saw it years ago in the theater when it came out, and then I had it on DVD. And one of my favorite things about that is that we create our own heaven. And his heaven, of course, was the painting that his wife did. And then that was their house, and he wanted to be with his wife. And then the children took on different forms because they didn't need to show him that they were his children right away. Do you think a lot of all of that movie holds true when we die?
Absolutely. When you physically pass, you leave behind your physical body, obviously, but you take your mind, your emotions, your experiences, your past, you take everything with you. And you always have a choice in saying what you want to experience in the non-physical. So for some people, they're very much attached to religion, and they want to see Jesus and the Golden Gate. Some people decide they don't want to see that. They want to see the mountains and nature, or their grandmother, or their husband who was their high school sweetheart. So everyone is different. Now I say their high school sweetheart, but there are some cases where a person passes and goes directly to a loved one, for real, not as a mind-generated reality, but they truly meet up with a loved one.
Which is very similar to that movie where they kind of cross over into each other's realities, yes?
Right, exactly.
Okay. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. I really enjoyed the fact that the soul had its own unique identifier. Like it had its own likes, its own dislikes. And each one of them was just uniquely different. And for them to have their own heaven, their own paradise on the other side was just a wonderful concept. But it also talked about the negative side of it. And it didn't really say that it was hell where these people were going to, but it was almost like they were condemning themselves because of depression or because of anger. They were condemning themselves, their soul, into something that was darker. Is that something that
Mm-hmm.
it really happens to some people who cannot let go of that depression or anger or the negativity?
There are definitely people who will condemn themselves to a place like purgatory. I cannot say that I've ever spoken with someone in the non-physical who has said they've been in a place called hell or they've been in a place called heaven. I have spoken with, worked with those in the non-physical who have been in a place of pain, fear, or in a place of joy. But I've never had anyone mention God, at least in the religious sense, heaven, hell. So purgatory, I see it as a place where you're kind of stuck. You don't know which way to go. You don't know what choice to make. You don't feel like you have a choice. And there are people who are essentially stuck in that position because of their pain, though. Not because they've done things wrong, not because they've been punished, but because of the pain that they hold on to.
So it's the spirit that's holding them. It's nothing to say that somebody's hovering over them, judging them and saying that you were so wrong, that you did this, you need to now be punished, I'm going to punish you. It's more like saying we know instinctively that we either did something wrong or we're harboring those feelings. And then therefore we are punishing ourselves in a way.
I've never had someone say they have been punished by some higher spirit. I have encountered ones in the non-physical who have been controlled by one with dark intentions, who's very manipulative, very controlling. They want power. I've had those types of situations. But having said that, I recently received some feedback on my book, Silent Whispers, through a book contest, and one of the judges commented that I very conveniently did not mention God or heaven. And when I read that, I thought, that never occurred to me to even mention God or heaven, because that's never come up. It's never been a topic. No one's ever talked about it in the ones that came to me that are relevant to Silent Whispers anyway. So, yes, those are the non-physical that I've encountered, which have been many. They've never made that relevant, though some have talked about being controlled by another entity.
In your book, I wanted to get into that because, and we had talked about this last time when you were in the studio. There's a symbol on the cover of your book.
Yes.
And that symbol is very unique. And a lot of people who look at your book, which, by the way, for everybody, her book is Silent Whispers. And they can find that on Amazon, correct?
Yes.
And on the cover of the book, and while we're talking, I'm going to see if I can pull it up here, and maybe James can put it up on the screen so you can see it. But there is a symbol. And Tammy, what is that symbol, and how did that come to you?
That symbol is a recreation. It's a computerized recreation of an actual symbol that was placed on my dusty driver's side window on my car. And it was right after I was on a trip with the two other women that I talk about in Silent Whispers. We were on a trip. We didn't know what we were exploring, what we were we were totally clueless. Like, we didn't even know why we were in this location that we were guided to go to through advice. So we had stopped at a particular location, walked around, 7-8 minutes. The two of us did. The third person stayed in the car, taking things out of her shoe from another walk that we had gone on. So her back was turned to the driver's side window, so she was in the passenger side. When I came back to the car, when both of us came back to the car, I noticed something was off. And when I got in the car, I noticed on the window there was a symbol stamped into the dust, like a perfect shaped stamp. And it wasn't there when we had parked 6-7 minutes before. It was an isolated area, empty, no other human being around us, at least alive, and it just appeared. So I took a picture of it. And the place that we were staying at, it was an Airbnb type place. We were talking to the owner. She came to visit us. We spoke with the owner, and she said, I have a friend who's an engineer. He has a logical explanation for everything. I'll go get him. She went down the road. She brought her friend, and he looked at it on the window. I didn't erase it. I didn't wipe it off. And he had no explanation. He was clueless. But he decided to regenerate it on his computer and then sent it to us. So this symbol is something that just appeared out of the blue. We didn't learn until later who created that symbol and why.
And who did create that symbol?
The ones who created the symbol are ones I talk about more. Well, I don't talk about them at all in the first book, actually, but I talk about them in the second book, and they are the female extraterrestrials. Highly compassionate.
Really?
Highly intelligent. Highly evolved. And they placed that symbol there to let us know that they were watching the work that we're doing. You know, what they were going to do with that, I didn't know at the time, but they were letting us know that they were aware.
So we just went a totally different direction. We are now talking about extraterrestrial contact through this symbol.
Right.
Now, have you had any other contact with extraterrestrials aside from this?
Yes.
Okay. I take it from your laugh, yes, that is a key thing.
Yes.
Okay. Can tell me a little bit more about that?
As I wrote a couple of experiences, well, more than a couple of experiences, but specifically a couple of experiences where I came in contact with the Greys.
Really?
Who, in my experience, are not very nice.
Well, a lot of people describe the Greys as robotic in nature, and that they're emotionless.
Mm-hmm. They are. The ones I encountered, there's no emotion. You know, there's no anger. There's no hate. There's no fear. There's literally no emotion. There is, though, a desire to control and manipulate.
Really? But what about the female ones that gave you this symbol? Are they different?
Well, they are, but they're completely different species. They're not the Greys.
Oh, really? Okay.
They look very different. They act very different. They have much emotion, much compassion, very deep and loving.
Really? So they tend to take on that feminine, that motherly type emotion, to where they are they wanting to, do they show, or do you ever feel protected by them? Do you feel like you don't need to be afraid of them? Versus,
I would say feminine. I would not necessarily motherly.
Okay.
I didn't get the motherly sense, but definitely the feminine sense.
Okay.
Of the nurturing, but not in a motherly way, if that makes sense.
And it does. And when you say a different species, do they look different than the Greys, or do they share similar? Yeah.
One of my tasks on one of my trips that I write about in book 2, not book 1, was to really discern the difference between the ETs who are manipulative and the ETs who carry great loving energy or evolved energy, let's say. because you can't match what they look like with what they offer. Hollywood likes to portray a certain image.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood likes to present an extraterrestrial that looks like a monster and acts like a monster,
Mm-hmm.
which makes logical sense. But the ones that I saw on one of our trips, for me to be tested, to discern the difference, to feel the difference, not just see the difference, is you can have one who's really manipulative, and they're beautiful, gorgeous. And then you have ones who are absolutely loving and compassionate, and they're not picture beautiful like you would imagine. You know, they're not model beauty that we like to attach to in
Mm-hmm.
this dimension, in this world.
But they're caring, and
But they're
they're
exactly.
easily approachable if you can just get over the physical side of them.
They carry an energy of great compassion and no nonsense.
Okay. So
They have no intention of harming anyone. They want to assist.
So we're describing two different entities here so far.
Yes.
Are there more?
Species.
Yeah, species. Yes, correct. Are there more?
I am told there are 60 plus different species that visit the Earth.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. That kind of reminds me of the Men in Black. Do you think that our government has contact with these species?
Definitely.
And when they have contact, do you think that they have the technology?
I'm not sure what their level of technology is in regards to contact, but in my experience, there are people deep in the government, I'm talking deep, who have personal connection and contact with some of these extraterrestrials.
Really?
And if they don't have personal contact with some of the other extraterrestrials, they have knowledge.
So in other words, what you're saying is that some people in our government are in a direct communication, nothing that can be dismissed as a dream or a hallucination or anything like that, a direct connection, physical, with extraterrestrials.
In my experience, yes.
Wow. I think that's a pretty big, heavy statement. You know, I know the government, there's a lot of secrecy that goes around with the government. It's always been that way. And I understand that the government has its reasons for wanting to keep certain things a secret. But do you ever think that there will be a time when we experience like a disclosure, or we're all made aware of what's going on? And are these ETs trying to get everybody to that point?
Well, that would certainly help my book. But I don't know. I just don't know.
I mean, because clearly
if it does happen, who knows if it happens before I'm dead.
Yeah, well, and clearly they reached out to you, and I know that they reach out to a lot of other people, because I've talked to so many people who have had experiences with extraterrestrials, and the stories that they tell, a lot of times there's similarities in the story, but then other times it seems like they're dealing with a completely different species altogether, which makes sense from what you said. If there's 60, plus species visiting the Earth, I'm just wondering, what is there some kind of uniform law, like, saying you can mess with humanity and do what you need to do. I know with abductions, sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're positive. You can do those kind of things, but just don't make yourself seen in public in a mass orchestrated event.
Well, I think so in a way. I don't think that extraterrestrials really want themselves to be known.
Really?
I I don't see them as having such an ego they have to be known about, like a famous person might have an ego.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, though, that the government and certain extraterrestrials are in agreement. Here's what can go on. If not some of the extraterrestrials stating, here's what we're going to do, here's how you're going to accept it. So the extraterrestrials do have a lot of power. They have really strong technology. They're very intelligent. Their compassionate side, for some of them, their compassionate side is very lacking or non-existent. But they're really smart and just super, super intelligent to be able to do things that we wouldn't even think of. The Greys have the ability to levitate a person and move them through a wall because the wall's not solid. Now, scientists talk about that. That's not new. A wall being not solid, furniture is not solid, we're not solid.
Well, what is it
if it's about that.
What is it if it's not solid?
It's something that you can look. I can't say that I'm well versed in it, but that nothing is really solid. So that is known. That's not a secret. But rays can move people through a wall, through a door.
I've heard many stories about Greys coming through walls. As a matter of fact, just materializing through a wall. And all of this, and that's a very scary thing. If you're in your room late at night, you wake up, it's pitch black in your room, and all of a sudden you're seeing some figure, which could be very scary, by the way, materializing through your wall, and it's coming for you because it's going to take you. That's a very scary feeling.
It is very scary.
Although, yet some of them, like you say, could be coming here under good terms. They could be trying to be more of a positive influence to humanity versus a negative. And in your book...
I'm not sure how many are here to help humanity as there are ones here to help the Earth.
Okay.
The ones that I met, the female ones, are in very much support of our work in helping children leave the control of the Greys, leave the control of the government. But many of the loving species, they're here for the Earth more so than humanity.
Because we're destroying our Earth?
I'm not sure if it's because we're destroying our Earth, but, when we pass, we move on.
Mm-hmm.
We can move on to another planet, another reality, or meaning our soul, our bodies, our consciousness.
So when we die, it's whatever we choose to do.
Right. It's where our soul chooses best for us to go, our consciousness. But this planet, this needs to be here. It needs to continue supporting third-dimensional life, the animal kingdom, the nature kingdom that originally it was set up for.
Okay, well, if it was originally set up for the animal kingdom, how did we get here?
That's a question I hear people ask all the time.
I think, it's a pretty good question because we are different. We are so different from the majority of the species that are on this planet. I mean, we have everything from animals to bugs to, there's just so much out there, but then you just have us. And then we are so different with how we create society, how we have laws, we structure, we communicate, our intellect, how our brains work is a very unique process.
It is, but if you look at it, it's not too different from the animal kingdom. They have their rules, who's in charge, who's submissive, how they feed themselves, where the pack goes. They have their own guidelines and the way that they survive. But yes, we have a different level of consciousness. We have a consciousness that can evolve beyond that animalistic structure. That is true. So why and how did people end up here? From what I have learned from my own teacher, we fell. We fell from a fourth dimensional consciousness. For many people, we gave our power outside of ourselves. We gave more power to our creation than we gave to ourselves. And as that creation grows with the power that we gave it, it leads to a lower level of consciousness over a really long period of time. Not just one choice does it. It's a really long period of time that it occurs.
Now, Tammy, I know we only had an hour tonight, and it just is never, it's not long enough because we have so much that we get into. And I know we could take this on for another hour, but we physically can't here in the studio. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity because we're going to be ending the show in four minutes. And I want you to let everybody know about your book. But before you do, I just need to know, do animals go to the other side with us?
I think that we can see our spirit or our animal spirit on the other side, yes. I have not had that experience myself, but I think so. Okay.
That should be some slightly good news for some listeners out there, because I know a lot of people are attached to their animals. They love their animals.
Very much.
Yes. Okay, well, Tammy, let us know a little bit more about how people can reach you and get your book, Silent Whispers.
Okay, so my website is empowermenttruehealing.org. My book, Silent Whispers, What One Thinks is Crazy, Another Knows is True, is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any online retailer sells it.
Okay, perfect. So empowermenttruehealing.org, and then anybody can find Silent Whispers through Amazon or any online retailer. And definitely check out the book. I know it's a great book, and I definitely, Tammy, if we could have you on again soon, I would really like to get in some other questions and also get some feedback from our audience, which we weren't able to get to tonight because it was just a quick show. But if we could have you on again sometime soon, that would be really great.
That sounds wonderful.
Thank you, Tammy, so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That was Tami Urbanek. And remember, her website is empowermenttruehealing.org, and her book is Silent Whispers, and you can get that on Amazon. And I want to do a quick wave to everybody on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for checking this out, and appreciate everything. If you want to follow us on YouTube, definitely go up and subscribe because we have a lot more guests coming in next week, and then the week after we have a lot of guests that we're going to be talking about with paranormal on the show. Things such as ghosts, UFOs. There's so much that we do. Check us out at faustfiles.com, and also just subscribe to us, and we'll keep bringing you more content and more guests just like Tammy, and it'll be a fun time. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.